In 2024, something unprecedented happened. All 10 of the year's highest-grossing movies were sequels. Inside Out 2, Deadpool and Wolverine, and Despicable Me 4 dominated the box office, with the rest of the top 10 being direct follow-ups too. No reboots, no prequels, just more of the same. Not everyone is thrilled about Hollywood's sequel obsession, though, least of all George Lucas. The man who practically invented modern franchises slammed the trend. Speaking to French media, Lucas said, "The stories they're telling are just old movies. Let's do a sequel. Let's do another version of this movie. There's no original thinking. The big studios, they don't have an imagination." The irony? This critique comes from the creator of Star Wars, a franchise that spawned sequels, prequels, spin-offs, and about $1 billion in merch. But Lucas has a point. Here's the top 10 highest-grossing films of 2024. Disney's Bob Iger didn't hold back when explaining the company's strategy earlier this year. "Sequels are where the value is right now," he said during a quarterly earnings call in May 2024, and Inside Out 2 proved him right in a big way. Released in June, it became the undisputed box office champion of the year, not just dominating 2024, but also landing as Disney's biggest hit in half a decade. It's now the third highest-grossing film of the 2020s, behind Spider-Man: No Way Home and Avatar: The Way of Water. For perspective, Disney hadn't seen numbers like this since The Rise of Skywalker in 2019, which barely cracked $1 billion. Marvel may have hit some rough patches lately, but Deadpool and Wolverine reminded everyone why the MCU isn't done yet. Pulling in $1.3 billion worldwide, it became the highest-grossing R-rated film of all time. Directed by Sean Levy, the film leaned heavily on the chemistry between Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool and Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, and fans showed up in droves. The movie also helped turn Marvel's fortunes around after a rather rough post-pandemic patch, during which the once unbeatable studio delivered its biggest bomb, The Marvels, and was forced to drastically reshape future plans following the conviction of Jonathan Majors in an assault case. The Minions are back, and they're still printing money. With a nearly $1 billion box office haul on a $100 million budget, Despicable Me 4 is Universal's answer to Disney's dominance. This franchise has been churning out hits for over a decade, with every sequel landing somewhere between $900 million and $1.15 billion globally. And that's just the films. When you add in merchandise, the numbers get even crazier. Minions-themed Halloween and Christmas merch are now a staple, and Universal has successfully turned these little yellow blobs into their own version of Mickey Mouse. Honestly, even if this series halved its box office returns, it would still be wildly profitable. Until we see an Ice Age-style collapse, this franchise is staying exactly where it is, on top. Finally, audiences are giving intelligent sci-fi the respect it deserves. It's about time. Just think back to when Blade Runner 2049 struggled to make its money back. Dune Part 2 crushed it in premium formats like IMAX, and the hype for Dune Saga feels almost on par with Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. The director sees this movie as the conclusion to his original vision, describing Parts 1 and 2 as one entity. However, he's already working on a third movie, Dune Messiah, which would take place 12 years later and wrap up Paul Atreides' story. And that will also end his own association with the Dune universe, even though Frank Herbert penned 4 other Dune sequels after Dune Messiah. The Monsterverse is alive and well. The New Empire became the highest-grossing film in the franchise, pulling in $571 million worldwide. This is the 5th movie in the series, and it's clear the fans are still here for it. While some doubted its potential after the first trailer, the film proved its critics wrong and delivered the heart and visual spectacle that audiences love. Legendary Pictures wasted no time announcing a sequel. This next installment will be directed by Grant Sputore, whose only previous feature-length credit is I Am Mother, 2019. A bold, maybe even risky choice, but the decision to strike while the iron is hot shows Legendary knows how to keep the momentum going. Kung Fu Panda 4 quietly became Universal's highest-grossing animated film not produced by Illumination, with $547 million worldwide. And that's despite the movie being, well, let's call it predictable. Critics and fans alike found it a bit too safe, likening it to an extended episode of a Nickelodeon cartoon rather than a proper cinematic event. But let's not underestimate the franchise power here. Between Jack Black's viral promotion, a tight 90-minute runtime, and a light family-friendly story, Kung Fu Panda 4 was designed to succeed, and it did. While it might not leave a cultural imprint, it proved that sometimes even mediocrity can sell tickets when the brand is strong enough. Critics may have called Venom 3 the weakest of the trilogy, and financially, they're not wrong. It didn't even hit the $500 million mark, a benchmark Venom 2 reached without opening in China. And during the pandemic, no less. This one did open in China, yet it's still underperforming. At 41% on Rotten Tomatoes, critics weren't impressed, but audiences gave it a solid 81%. Love it or hate it, the Venom trilogy has been a surprising win for Sony, thanks to relatively modest budgets, around $110 million at most, and solid returns. And while The Last Dance implies this is the end, the door is clearly open for a sequel. Let's hope Sony doesn't mess it up by sidelining Tom Hardy. Finally, a sequel that isn't trying to be part of some endless cinematic universe. Tim Burton made his big screen return with Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, and it was a win both critically and financially. This marks Burton's third highest grossing movie ever, right behind Alice in Wonderland and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. What's surprising is how fresh the movie felt. It's packed with ideas, almost too many for one film. Between the film's success and exploding merch sales, it's clear the Beetlejuice brand has staying power. Even younger audiences, thanks to the viral Beetlejuice musical on TikTok, are very familiar with this iconic IP. It's official. The Bad Boys franchise has crossed $1 billion globally with Ride or Die. This movie had its fair share of drama, from development being paused after Will Smith's infamous Oscars slap to delays from the Actors Guild strike. Somehow, it still delivered. They even incorporated the slap into the film, with Smith's character being slapped multiple times, a cheeky nod to the real-life incident. What really worked here was the return of comedy to the action genre, a throwback to when protagonists could joke about the absurd situations they're in. Despite early naysayers claiming Smith's career was over, this movie proves the franchise is still alive and kicking. The Planet of the Apes reboot series continues with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, the fourth installment and 10th film overall. It's a standalone sequel to War for the Planet of the Apes, but good luck figuring out the timeline of this franchise. The box office performance is decent, but shows diminishing returns compared to the Caesar trilogy, which had bigger stars like Andy Serkis, Gary Oldman, and Woody Harrelson. Reviews were solid, but the lack of household names and confusion about whether viewers needed to see the earlier films hurt its theatrical run. That said, it's likely to turn a modest profit with home media and streaming revenue. While a sequel isn't guaranteed, the franchise isn't in the grave just yet.